Josh, I guess can you come check because I don't know if we are live. Just stop streaming. Start recording, maybe.
It's streaming. I'm not sure
So
how
should I?
recording works. I haven't done that yet. This stream.
All right, everybody. This looks very professional slash not. Welcome to the MMAvens pre-fight UFC 302 show. My name is Luke Slater with my co-host Roland Wraith, and we are here to break down the fights on the UFC 302 pay-per-view tonight. Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking about these fights, Roland.
Well, I think we should give a little background information.
Yeah, for sure. First things first.
Just to give us some credibility here. Former amateur MMA fighter, two-hip surfer, Tapology, and Shergoff. I would not say that had to do with my skill level. Some people's first name is the last name, vice versa. My last name happens to be a nickname. So when I fought, it was Roland. My nickname was the Wraith. My name's Roland Wraith. The threw everything off. But here I am now.
Here we are. So, my name is just my real name, but Luke instead of Lucas. So that's the only story behind that. I am a longtime MMA fan, probably of 20 years at least, since 2005. Ultimate Fighter season. Which one was the first season I saw live? Season 3, I think, with Michael Bisping was the first one that I was watching live. But before that, I was watching the fights, just not the Ultimate Fighter. And we watched the UFC VHS tapes way back in the day as well. So over 20 years at least.
The first pay-per-view I saw, like that we purchased, was Lydell Couture Suit.
Okay. And I don't know if I saw that one. I think the first one I saw live with you guys was maybe Jeremy Horn versus Chuck Liddell. Is that right?
Yeah, I remember you ended up hanging out and staying later because everyone was going to come around parents' house to watch the fights. You ended up staying and got hooked.
Yeah. So always love mixed martial arts. Started with the love of just martial arts and movies way back in the day, and transferred into the real thing. So yeah, I think we have a lot to offer. Extensive background. I did boxing for a year in college and jiu-jitsu for a year in college, but beyond that, not much. So about as much qualifications as maybe Luke Thomas. No, I'm kidding. Definitely not even as much as him. But anyway, so all that to say, we're hugely passionate about the subject. We have a lot of knowledge of the sport, and I think we have a lot to offer, and analysis and just punditry wise. So anyway, first let's break down the main event between Islam Makhachev and Dustin Poirier. Tell me what you think about this fight.
It's hard for me to envision this fight without getting too emotional. Probably right now, Dustin Poirier is my favorite fighter in the UFC, so I obviously want him to win and succeed. However, I am worried about this matchup, not necessarily because it's Makhachev and it's his name. I mean, Makhachev has fought a real heavyweight since 2022.
Mm-hmm.
But my fear is that the times Dustin has lost in the lightweight division, both by submissions, Habib, round 3, rear naked choke, and then Charles Oliveira, also round 3, rear naked choke. However, the techniques used to lock in and finish the choke were radically different. So I don't think those two fights show a hole necessarily in Poirier's game. I don't think those two fights make him susceptible to rear naked chokes at some logical extent. His only other submission loss was by the Korean Zombie in featherweight. So in Dustin Poirier's 14-year career, he's only been submitted twice at lightweight by Habib and Charles.
Yeah, arguably two of the best submission artists in the history of the sport.
So
In the best light, in the deepest, best division in the sport.
Yeah, and if you want to get into some, weird MMA math, I mean, Oliveira took Chandler's back. Chandler's never been submitted. He got out of Oliveira's back take and didn't get choked out. However, Poirier got choked out by Oliveira, yet Poirier is the only one to choke out Chandler. So, if you look at it all different avenues, the MMA math just starts to break down. Especially if you think about Charles. He has been submitted by Jim Miller, Makhachev, most recently, and then guillotined by Pettis and Ricardo Lamas. Dustin Poirier was the first person to have submitted Anthony Pettis, and his first fight at lightweight, he beat the shit out of someone who ended up submitting Anthony Pettis. So it's honestly it's hard for me to get a good grasp on Makhachev. I feel like he's being given an easier route than others because he's Habib's boy, and they want to keep that legacy and Russian viewership alive. But in terms of resume, strength of competition, Islam's is pretty weak. I mean, his first ranked opponent was Thiago Moises, and they gave Thiago Moises a rank just so Makhachev could fight a ranked opponent. And that was his 10th fight in the UFC. By Conor McGregor's 10th fight, he already had the lightweight title. I'm not saying he didn't have an easy route, but Makhachev's career has been this slow, long process. But that being said, he still might choke out Dustin.
Yeah, he's definitely, arguably the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. He is on a lot of lists. I still think that those, more than any other rankings list, the pound-for-pound is kind of unverifiable, or obviously unverifiable. But I do think that Dustin has a way better chance than the odds are giving him. So we'll do picks on here sometimes, like DraftKings Sportsbook. I put bets on the fights. I'm going with my heart on this for Dustin. I want Dustin to win, and I think he's a prohibitively large underdog in this. I think plus 455 is what he was sitting at when I placed my first bet, and then I placed another bet later that had changed slightly to like plus 440. But just it's an uphill battle. The vaunted Luke Thomas, 35 years and older, 0% success rate for title fight wins at 155 and below is a thing. But again, not even again, this is the first time we're talking about it, but stuff like that can only tabulate what's happened already. And Dustin,
it's like the Drake bet is a journalistic measurement.
Right. It really doesn't mean anything in all reality. But yeah, exactly, the Drake bet, or the Eminem song walkout song thing, where it's like something like that. But yeah, I think Dustin has the tools to beat Islam for sure. The Khabib fight was so long ago that I think Dustin said it himself. It'd be ridiculous that it wouldn't have gotten better since then. And he said,
say prior, he had still not had hip surgery yet in the Khabib fight.
Oh yeah, that's right too. Yeah,
his hips are trashed. The one he had surgery on was an extensive surgery. He could barely walk. I've actually had the same injury, and like I said, I do have a martial arts background. I have 2 head kick knockouts. By the time my hips were fucked up, I couldn't kick above the waist. Mm-hmm. So just having some taste of what he was going into this fight struggling with, it's almost horrible to think about the pain he endured just to get there. And then, of course, it's in Abu Dhabi. So,
Right.
and I don't trust Abu Dhabi to have the whole roster's interest in mind to just make the Dagestan fighters.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, I think Dustin can knock out anybody. I think that if this fight stays standing, Dustin is going to really give Islam a hard time. I think that if he can if he can use scrambles, if he does get taken down, to get back to his feet and just try, he's got to keep it standing. I guess I don't really have much confidence in him winning on the ground, which I don't think many or anybody would. Um, I I really hope. Okay, if he fights him like he fought BSD, Benoit Saint Denis, it's not a winning strategy. But I really do think that he was trying to prove a point in the BSD fight, and I would be very surprised if he used the same strategy against Islam.
Yeah, because he showed the same nonchalance in on the ground with Benoit Saint Denis that Volkanovski had in his first fight with Makhachev, where it's just like,
Right.
I'm not even, take me down, whatever. Like, I do not care. You can't shit me.
Right, and he never looked in super. I mean, I guess BSD had him flattened out at one point, but he once, and then he went for an armbar, and Dustin was out of that. So yeah, I just think that he has a much better shot than the odds are giving him, and he's as live a dog to kind of like reverse the curse or whatever of that 35 and older statistic or whatever. But yeah, it's an uphill battle. Islam is in his prime, and he is, on a however long it's whatever the win streak is since his his one loss in the UFC and in his career. So it's going to be a great fight, I think. Do you have a prediction for finish or round or anything like that? Or
I don't foresee it going to a decision.
Yeah, neither do I.
Just based upon both of their styles. If it were a decision, it would be because Islam wrestle fucked him the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Islam's fight against Drew Dober, it was just Dober being smashed before getting choked out. That could be a fear of mine, but I do think that the choke would present itself based on Islam's skill. So, just if I had to, give a prediction, which I'm being asked to do, I would say Islam will probably submit Dustin in round 3 if Dustin cannot finish him by round 2.
Oh, okay. So you think that if Dustin can't get a finish by the end of the second round, that it's an Islam win potentially?
But that would also depend upon if Dustin's not getting a finish in the second round, or at least looking good. It's probably because his strikes are being nullified by the takedown, the grappling. I mean, Islam has some decent striking. A 5'10" guy head kicking a 5'6" guy doesn't to me represent striking excellence, but I mean it's still a good kick.
Yeah. No, I would be incredibly surprised if he got a knockout win, Islam.
Yeah, I don't. Dustin, I mean, he's seen it all. He even saw the head kick coming from Gage. He blocked it.
Mm-hmm.
Got hit by it. So, again, there's this weird narrative, I feel like, where it's like, Dustin lost to Gaethje by head kick. Islam, head kick knockout against Volkanovski. Therefore, Islam will knock out Dustin with head kick.
Well, it's funny how so much of the arguments for Islam are for like almost the transitive property. It's like Khabib choked out Dustin, Charles choked out Dustin, Islam will choke out Dustin, or like you say, he got finished with a head kick against Justin. He's going to could get finished by Makhachev that way too. I think it's a knockout by Dustin. I say third round TKO or KO. Probably KO, to be honest, if he gets it. I think his hands are just so heavy. If not, then probably around that same time, maybe fourth round submission by Islam. But yeah, I'm just happy to see the fight. I didn't think we would get this fight necessarily after uh, the um, BMF belt fight between him and Justin Gaethje. I thought it would be a while before they would fight again, or get it. It would be longer until Poirier got the shot again, if he got it at all. So I'm just happy that the cards fell where they did with the Arman and Charles fight. I mean, I'm not happy with that result. I wanted Charles to win that fight. Dustin and Charles are my favorite lightweights and favorite fighters right now in any weight class. But yeah, I'm just thankful for this fight's happening, that Dustin gets a chance to kind of finish the story, as it were. I think you were saying this before, his record, the names that he's collected over time. I think right now he has a far better resume than Islam. Although again, Islam hasn't been in the game as long and can catch up with that for sure at some point if he's to continue doing what he's doing. But I think at this point, Dustin just has beaten better guys over the course of his career, and is. Many people have been saying, and I agree, that like even if he isn't to get this title, the undisputed title, he's one of those few fighters who can. Wow, I need Hey Josh, can you give me the plug-in for this? This computer's literally about to die.
Oh,
Like, I need it literally this moment.
where's that?
In the bag, in the right front pocket. Wow, this can be tragic. Um, so yeah, if you could just plug it in right there for me, please. But anyway, so yeah, I think that my pick is Dustin by KO, TKO in the third round. You think he would have to get in the first or second round, or it's Islam submission win most likely.
Yeah, if I didn't have an emotional investment in Justin Poirier, I would be confident Islam was going to beat him.
Okay, yeah, fair enough, and I do think that is fair, for sure. I do, but
Like it's like one of my things is that Poirier has been fighting his style of fight for a long time. He's not had to go against grapplers most of his career. Islam, on the other hand, is going against people who don't want to grapple him. So Poirier is a style of opponent that Islam is used to facing. One who wants to take his head off, defend the takedown, avoid grappling. Islam's used to that. Poirier is not. And that's why I'm afraid, because later in his career, when he's gone against two grapplers, he's struggled. Although anyone would struggle against Khabib, and Charles could potentially choke out anyone on the fence. So it wasn't like, he did a double leg, past Dustin's guard, mounted, gift wrap, tape in the back, choke him out. It was a very slick, fast, explosive submission, the kind that like Frank Mir or Ortega would get.
right.
Another thing too is, and this is by no means minimizing Makhachev's grappling, but I don't like this narrative of how easily he dominated Charles on the ground. Because people are like, man, when Charles got choked out, that squeeze must have been insane, as Jorgen says, the black belt squeeze. And if you watch the fight, right before Charles gets choked out, he gets hit hard with, I believe, a right hand. So he gets rocked, he falls down, gets choked out. So this idea that Charles, being this submission magician, one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in MMA of all time, and that he had some like shootout with Islam on the ground is just not true. He got clipped by Islam, lost his abilities. You see, every hit, you go down the belt. And
Oh, right.
choked out without doing any defense. So it's anyone who knows jiu-jitsu would have done more than Charles did, which shows how much that strike affected him.
Yeah, and it was a well-landed strike, and yeah, it's true. He didn't get out-grappled. It was literally part of a striking to submission finishing sequence, kind of like Nick or Nate Diaz.
Like Nate Diaz, so many of his guillotines have come after he's sometimes been rocked or hit hard, and he does those slick combinations, and then when they shoot in, he usually gets the guillotine. He submitted Tony Ferguson off the shot guillotine. That's how he submitted Jim Miller. That's how he submitted Melvin Gillard. So a lot of Diaz's chokes come in a scramble after he's rocked his opponent on the feet.
Right.
It's very rare that you see jiu-jitsu play out in MMA. Usually the choke comes from getting your ass whooped, so you don't know how to defend yourself. Not to say that these people aren't good at jiu-jitsu, but when Taporia choked out Bryce Mitchell, I mean, you don't think, oh man, that's some black belt level technique there. Bryce was pulverized and took his neck.
No, 100%. That's totally right. So yeah, I think that this is a dynamic fight. I think, like you say, it's gonna, if it stays on the ground, Islam's gonna be dominant. If it stays on the feet, Dustin's going to be dominant. But I do think that this fight will take place in a lot of those liminal spaces. I think the clinch will be a big factor. And to be honest, I think Dustin can use a lot of those calf kicks that he used against Conor in a way against Islam to make him hesitant for the takedown or to have less weight on his back foot. Another thing is that I feel like, I could be wrong about this, but I think that Islam does not have as many fights against southpaws, which is another wrinkle to this. But at the same time, I mean, he trained with Khabib for so long when Khabib was training for Dustin. So, I mean, he knows Dustin pretty well, I'm sure. So Khabib's going to be in his corner, which is fascinating. Hasn't been in his corner for the last couple fights at least. So.
Oh, and that's another important thing that people need to remember and to consider is if you have the same stance as your opponent or the opposite stance, that will give or take away the head kick. So if I'm going southpaw and my opponent is orthodox, the head kick's not there. The body kick's there, but the head kick's not there. So as soon as the stance switches, that kick becomes unavailable.
Cool. Yeah, that's right. And what about sorry, I just kind of like lost my train of thought, but do you think that this fight can be dynamic on the ground? Do you think Dustin can get in some scrambles, or do you think he's going to kind of have to either wait out the round like he did against Charles in the second round of their fight, or how do you see it playing out on the ground compared to his previous fights, Dustin? Do you think he's pretty well prepared for that aspect of the game? He said one thing about the Khabib fight was that he literally just having that fight taught him so much because he didn't realize how much control someone like Khabib could have. He'd never felt that before. So I think that there's a part of him, and especially training with Mateusz Gamrot, and I'm guessing, I don't know if Renato Moicano was in his training camp at all, but he'll have Mateusz in his corner. He's the fourth cornerman, I think, along with Dia Davis, Mike Brown, and I don't know who the third would be. Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
He's him in the corner? Oh, Adriano Martins? Or
I wouldn't want to say yes or no because I don't know.
Okay, yeah. I
Whoever knocked out Makhachev is rumored or reportedly in his corner.
Oh, that's awesome. So yeah, I think that that's also a factor. It's just having had the Khabib fight gives him that. He knows.
No, exactly.
He knows what to expect.
That goes back to my point with Dustin being choked out by Khabib and Oliveira. The Khabib could not choke out Dustin like Oliveira choked him out, and Oliveira could not choke out Dustin like Khabib.
Yeah, Adriano Martins. I just looked it up on Tapology.
Yeah, the control thing is a huge factor because they said Dustin was never controlled by Charles. There's that abysmal second round where Dustin just kept him in his closed guard and stalled because he was afraid of Charles.
And he admitted that he stalled too. I mean, that was the whole point almost, essentially.
And again, I'm not trying to fixate too much on this, but he has bad hips, and you need flexible, dexterous hips to have a good guard. So when I see him in guard, he looks like he has arthritis. Like it's the ball and socket has turned into hinge.
I got you.
And so when I see him in guard, even when he's pulling up submission, it seems so like strained. Granted, he has the technique, but I'm not impressed with his closed guard. But it's very hard to have an impressive closed guard.
And do you think that that's gotten better since the surgeries, though? Do you think we haven't seen a lot of it since then anyway, just because it hasn't come up? Yeah, I do remember that with body kick.
Because you watch that Khabib fight, he throws a left kick, and it looks like he did a front snap kick, then swung it into him, and then he trips over.
Because it was against Dan Hooker that was his first fight after the surgery, right? Because I remember his body kicks against Dan were like, I thought, pretty thunderous. I remember thinking because you could hear him at the apex. It was
they were better. You could tell that he could turn his hip over more instead of just like swinging him like that. You could actually get hip over for some striking. But yeah, you can still tell he still locks that limb. He kind of has that little, but that doesn't. And granted, too, I do not think this like one's closed guard ability is going to determine this fight.
Sure.
I think with Dustin is, he's obviously decent on the ground. He destroyed Chandler there after getting like hit and stuff too.
Yeah, man, Chandler.
And
I have a love-hate relationship with that dude.
My fear is that, and maybe I have to look at this a little bit more closely due to how it happens, but in Dustin's, at least when he fought Benoit and fought Chandler and Charles, regardless, he ends up allowing himself, like Tyron Woodley, to be like backed up against the cage. And then Dan Hooker almost knocked him out. So somehow Dustin always ends up like Anderson Silva would, but like not on purpose, back against the cage. And he's like, it's like he's forgotten where he was. So he's like fighting back, hits the cage, and it's like, oh shit. And then for
as good as his ring craft is and his boxing.
Well, I don't think he does have good ring.
Oh, ring craft. Sorry, as good as his boxing technique is, I should say. Sorry, his ring craft is not there.
And I'm just, like I said, in the BSD fight, I think he was more kind of messing around with him, and that's not an excuse. But if he, like you're saying, if he does mess around with Makhachev like that on the ground, he's getting.
Yeah, he'll get submitted so quickly. So I would be incredibly surprised if he treated that fight the same as he did the BSD one. I think he really was trying to test this guy who was outside of the top 10, but who had a lot of finishes. He wanted to take him everywhere and kind of show his level. And I think there's a bit of a troll to the whole, 100% there's a troll to the whole don't be silly, jump the ghillie kind of thing that he has going. But I really don't think, I don't know. I'm just saying, please, Dustin, do not try to jump a ghillie even once. Like, dear Lord, my heart will sink. I don't know. But again, to me, this fight is all gravy for Dustin's career. He's got his Sauce Hots company. He's got his charity. He's done so much in the sport that it really is just checking off a box that it is very important. But something you and I have talked about before, the belts in the divisions are sometimes almost randomly gotten. I mean, for Khabib, he fought Ally Quinta to win the belt. Dustin and Tony had fights that were arguably higher level to get their interim
Oh
belts.
yeah, yeah.
So the undisputed, to be honest, undisputed is kind of like the wrong word always, but they just like to use it. But yeah, like, I mean, Tony fought Kevin for the interim, Dustin fought Max for the interim, and I think both of those fights are more impressive victories than the one that Khabib had. I mean, Tony triangle choking Kevin, um, Poirier outclassing Max on the feet, and in what would have probably been fight of the night on any other card if it weren't for following the Izzy Kelvin fight. But basically, all this to say is that it really is more of a, yeah, I don't know. It's just gravy to me. I feel like he's accomplished everything he could possibly accomplish in the sport except getting an undisputed belt. I hope he gets it. It's a tall task for anybody. But I think that as much trouble as Volk gave Izzy, Islam, gosh, nobody's calling Islam Izzy. Um, I think that Dustin can really, he's just dynamic. I think he's a dynamic grappler as well, as seen by the Pettis fight and other fights he's had. I think he's just literally just been submitted by two of the best submission artists at lightweight ever. And
Yeah.
and I don't think that's like very controversial to say. So yeah, it'll be a fun fight. Either way it goes, well, yeah, either way it goes, I'll be very disappointed if Islam wins. But again, it'll be a fun fight. Great matchup, and two of the highest level lightweights in the history of the sport fighting tonight.
Yeah, and kind of like what you're saying, it's almost a shame that like the Diaz brothers aren't more articulate, or that people would just take them more seriously. It's like because they aren't super articulate, people assume their ideas are invalid. But it turns out, I mean, and Nate Diaz will be happy to remind everyone, anytime, anywhere, that he was the forerunner of literally everything except Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. But, so, and he's been saying this whole time, the belt is a sham. Not in the sense of that if you win the belt, you don't deserve any praise, but who holds the belt, who fights for the belt, and when they fight for the belt is never merit based. Dustin's not fighting for merit. Dustin should not be fighting for a championship.
Yeah, fair enough.
Which I don't care. I mean, I'm happy to see him, but like, so if you look at, this is kind of what you were saying before. If you look at the lightweight division, when both, well, Dustin's always been slaughtering everybody, but when Tony was on his streak, you have the two biggest names at the moment, Khabib and Conor, both in lightweight. Their success and status as champions, that's more important to the UFC than merit.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at Dustin's trajectory up to his fight against Max, and then after that he fights Khabib. I mean, it's unreal who he faced.
He ended Max's streak.
Yeah.
I mean, he
And
still had the streak at featherweight, but as far as just like winning streak, he ended that streak, which was an incredible streak.
so here you have two people like Ferguson and Poirier, who, if it weren't for, you could call it political reasons, they would have been champions.
Yeah,
I mean, the circumstances surrounding all those fighters, not only just the circumstances, but the fact that Ferguson and Poirier were not only active, but were putting on spectacular performances. While then you have McGregor making all his money and just
taking the fight with Floyd,
and, which is fine. I mean, that's what you're in there for. But if you have to look at it two ways, you're in there to make money. But if the money making is getting in the way of the sport, as a fan, I'm getting angry. So I want every fighter to be rich, blah, blah, blah. But if a fighter's wealth and success is not only holding back other fighters, but literally prohibiting them from being champion, that's bullshit.
oh, 100%.
I mean, like we were saying before, imagine if you were like some professional athlete. Let's say you work at UPS. You're a manager. Someone drops a crate on you from a forklift. You get injured, and then you get demoted. It's like Tony trips over the wire. This is an at-work incident. He'd be eligible for workers' comp, to just put it as judiciously as possible, or judicially, sorry. So, and it just goes away. And so, all I have to say is, when I think about the greatest fighters in the lightweight division, I don't think about Habib and Conor first and foremost.
They just fought so sparsely in their primes.
And this is my main issue with Habib and his Dagestani crew. And this is coming from someone who's getting a PhD in Russian. I can't stand how the Russians, especially the Dagestanis, go about fighting. It infuriates me. And here's why. So you have this group of fighters who are from one area. However, the most powerful manager in MMA, Ali Abdelaziz, is working with both Dana White and the UFC, and he's working with everyone in Abu Dhabi. So Ali Abdelaziz is in it for himself. He's not an unbiased manager. He's there on behalf of the UFC. He's managing fighters on behalf of the UFC. So you have these fighters who never fight. They never fight. So that's what I remember about Habib, is he never fought. So when you say, tell me about Habib's legacy. Here's someone who never fought and was the most frightened person I'd ever seen in MMA when it came to a challenge. If he wouldn't take a fight on 2 years' notice. Like, it's borderline. Yeah, I don't know what my point is. My point is this, though, is that you have all these Dagestani fighters who have a ton of outside money from a dictator who murders people, a corrupt Dana White and Ali Abdelaziz, so they can get injured and fight once every 3 years, but they have the money to. So you have certain fighters that blow out their ACL, they can't afford rent, they have to fight. Umar Nurmagomedov sprains his knee, he's out for 3 years, but he's getting paid by Hidiro.
Right.
It pisses me off.
No, it's true. If you look back at Khabib and Umar and Islam's careers, there's so many canceled bouts and so many of them are injuries, which again, that happens in the sport. Of any sport out there, like, injuries are going to happen in MMA, but I think you're right. There's no way of fully knowing, but there's a fair chance that a lot of fighters would have gone through with a lot of those fights that they withdrew from, but they had the luxury of the backing of a whole government system to kind of take fights when and where they wanted to, and where they wanted to often, because so many of those fights take place in Abu Dhabi or on their terms. So,
And Makhav's popped for banned substances.
That's true, yeah.
And that was before a shoot-over fight. It got rescheduled because the charges were dropped immediately because apparently Makhav's doctor had prescribed it for a heart condition, which it seems to have gone away.
Right. Yeah, I had forgotten about it until you brought it up, to be honest. So they effectively got away. And that's the thing is about Ali Abdelaziz, is back when the antitrust lawsuit was still going on, Ali, a manager of the fighters, so somebody who should have been on the fighter's side in that antitrust lawsuit, was a key witness for the UFC. So we know where his loyalties lie. And
where's Noah?
and where's Noah? Exactly. Where is that guy? All right, so let's move on to the co-main event. We've got Paulo Costa fighting Sean Strickland. What do you think about this fight?
I gotta be honest, even though I consider myself like Triple X hardcore fan, I do enjoy not only fighters who troll, but when their success itself irks people like a troll would.
Okay.
So, I was impressed for example, with Sean Strickland's performance against Izzy.
Oh yeah,
Blown away
undeniable.
by it. But there's part of me that was glad that Sean Strickland beat Izzy, because him beating Izzy would make the whole community angry and think he's a sham. So I do enjoy seeing trolls essentially end reigns of fighters who get bored. That's a very general statement. I'm also not accusing champions of not being good fighters because they are boring. Because if I were a fighter, and now that we all know about pay, structure, everything, hang on to your belt. I mean, Anthony
By any means
Smith
necessary.
should have taken that belt from Jones.
Oh, for sure.
But
And Tyron Woodley, you can't blame him for his style. I mean, again, if you want to keep the belt, do what you can. I never liked watching a Tyron Woodley fight, but I don't blame him. Dana White once he lost that belt, he was never going to get even a title shot again. I mean, Dana hated him. Like, there's no way. So you really are just kind of you just got to do what you got to do. But yeah, I mean, for sure, Izzy too was somebody who I love his style. He's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC modern age. But he became cautious often in the past like 5 or 6 fights. I would say it seemed like he wasn't pulling the trigger the same way he used to for the most part. And hopefully that changes when he comes back. But I mean, there's a part of it that you just are kind of trying to hold on to the belt, not make mistakes, and many times in doing so, especially if you have a challenger who's also doing that, someone like Jared Cannonier, who I feel like just totally failed to pull the trigger against Izzy, to see somebody like Sean come in and go after it. Like, again, Sean is not a fighter I enjoy watching for the most part, or at least up until that fight. He was somebody who has impressive striking defense, but kind of sticks to that 1-2. It's kind of bread and butter. Striking, but that is probably one of the best performances I've ever seen. Well, that too, the lifting of the leg. So yeah, that was such an impressive performance, undeniable. Even though it was against one of my favorite fighters, and but yeah, sorry, I kind of cut you off.
Oh yeah, so for and Sean Strickland isn't necessarily like a classic troll by definition. It's more like his identity fits with a certain narrative, which makes people not like him or think he's white trash, neo-Nazi, etc.
I feel like he's authentically what people think Colby Covington is as his shtick, in a way. I mean, not exactly as cringe, but says similarly concerning things, but you can tell, like, this is just who he is, whereas Colby, it's this put-upon thing that maybe is enhancing his personality that's already there, but, like, it just feels inauthentic, where with Sean, it's just like, that, like, this is just who this man is.
It seems scripted.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, going back to the Izzy thing, it's like, if I'm champion and someone's going to step up, I'm going to be the one to take him down, take his belt, and they just play this cautious striking game. It's kind of like, all right, if you want to do that, feel free. I'm the champ. You're missing a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of the thing. It's like, I respect champions for doing that because it's their life, their body. But it doesn't mean I have to like it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I can't. You'd have to pay me to watch. I'd pay not to watch a George St. Pierre fight. Maybe there's like
post Matt Serra, essentially.
Oh my goodness. Like, it's. I remember dreading it at the pay-per-view, just dreading it.
He used to be one of my favorite fighters, but basically after the Matt Serra fight and seeing the subsequent fights of, like, how he just became so gun shy, it was like I was always rooting for Thiago Alves, Dan Hardy, really anybody, just because it was like, oh my gosh, you have become a pure control, pure risk-averse fighter to the point where it was just like, I mean, that Nick Diaz fight was almost interminable. Like, the lead-up was so fun, but then you get to the fight and he's like sticking in half guard, keeping him in.
Shamrock fought Gracie for that second time. Just stays in his guard for 3 hours.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So George knows that if I stay in Nick's guard or half guard, I'll win.
Mm-hmm.
So again, when you see a fighter use the rules to make it less of a fight, in my mind, it just takes the whole purpose away.
For sure.
Aside from that, I was happy to see Sean Strickland beat Adesanya. I did think he beat Dricus, but
Yeah, I think a lot of people did, actually. I think that in the moment, I thought Dricus won, but I could have scored it for Sean as well. And then somebody like, I think Luke Thomas, I think initially scored it for Dricus, but then in seeing it again, thought Sean won. And Dana White on the night thought Sean won. So it was an incredibly close fight.
yeah, but honestly, Sean needs to learn from his mistakes. If you keep having these split decision losses, then do something about it.
Yeah, Jared Cannonier's fight with Jared, that was a close one too.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he beat him, but it's like, you are very much aware that this is what happens when you fight. So if you don't want to keep it happening, then do something about it.
Right.
Open up a little bit more. And so Paulo Costa, going back to the question, he's another fighter that I didn't even know about or really liked. Someone I think is hilarious and follow.
His personality has really come across on Twitter or X or whatever.
And I've studied foreign languages. It's very hard to convey your personality in a foreign language, and especially when he was with Captain Eric and then Waleed Ismail, whatever his name is. They were essentially, Paulo doesn't know English well enough yet, and they're giving him an English script. Now that he's more comfortable with the language, he's showing his personality. He's hilarious. And I want him to beat Sean. I think he will. I think again, that fight he had with Adesanya, it was almost such a smear, almost, because he gets like, pumps in him twice too at the end. Like, that was such a, everything surrounding that fight was so bad or embarrassing, that kind of like took away from Costa. Then he had all those mishaps with missing weight and then fighting Vittori 205.
That was one of the funniest things. The way he handled it, I don't know how you possibly come out in a positive way from that. Like, not only did you miss weight, but you literally fought at 20 pounds heavier than the weight class, and you just got them to change it to that weight class. I mean, again, he lost, but wow, like, he found a way to just come out seeming hilarious about it. I don't know. That blew me away, because there was a time where he bothered me more. Like, I didn't enjoy him as much earlier on for that reason, where I think that Waleed Ismail and the Eric Albarazine, they were almost trying to be the Paul Heyman to Brock Lesnar kind of thing, WWE style. But once, like you said, his actual personality, and you see kind of where that humor comes from through GIFs and memes and things, you kind of get a better sense of it. Even though, even now, you see the pre-fight press conference, he's sitting there trying to engage with the audience, and it's still very heavily broken English. So I really do think that social media has been key in allowing him to connect with an audience in a way that he hasn't before. And I think that his losses recently, like I personally scored the fight against Robert Whittaker for him. I haven't gone back to rewatch it, so I could change that, but I thought he won that fight. And the fight with Vittori, I was happy to see it kind of made him pay for missing weight so badly. But I think he looks great, and I agree. I think that he will win. Similarly, I think the fight could play out similarly to the Jared Cannonier fight, although I think that Paulo could make it a little bit more dynamic than Jared. Jared's a little more limited, I feel like, compared to what Paulo does. But I feel like they're similar fighters. But I think the heavy hands can get through and the kicks. Man, that was the other thing that impressed me in that fight against Robert. Costa probably has thrown kicks plenty of times in the past. And I think he threw some against Izzy too. But like, that to me was the most effective kicking game I've seen from him. And I think that having the variety of strikes compared to what Sean is throwing could really be the difference. It is a 5-round fight though, and Sean is good at kind of those war of attritions with people. Do you think that it's a pretty closely matched fight, or are you pretty confident in your pick of Paulo?
I'm pretty confident in my pick of Paulo. Most of the X factors, or whatever you want to call it, with Strickland was like, just wrestle him or take him down. He's just going to strike. But Paulo's comfortable on the ground, and he's not timid. Like, whether he's fighting Romero, Adesanya, anyone, he just stands in front of you and just fights. So it's going to be interesting to me. It's like Sean's used to jabbing people up using his footwork. But what happens when someone just who can throw tremendous kicks with a lot of power is just going to stand in front of you?
Mm-hmm.
And I know Costa's going to kick, but I can't see that Sean's going to grab it and take him down. I don't think Sean has the to take him. He's just going to jab him up like the YouTuber. Try to. I just don't. Paulo Costa's strengths do not match well with Sean's weaknesses, which is aggression and power.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's his worst nightmare because he can't do either.
That is true. I think the only way Sean wins is by kind of doing the Max Holloway thing where he just outlands him over time. That's the one thing I'll say about Paulo is sometimes he gets so comfortable in there. I really think that's the only reason he lost the Robert Whittaker fight is that he just got outpointed when he was landing the heavier strikes. I mean, I feel like he multiple times almost finished Robert. Maybe it was just at the end of the first round, but there were multiple times in that fight where I was like, oh my gosh, this could be a finishing sequence. I never felt that way about anything Robert was doing to him. So having those 2 extra rounds, I think, like a lot of people are saying, I've heard across other podcasts that I check out, the idea that like if it goes past like a round and a half, that Sean can run away with it. But I don't know. I think that Paulo's he has underrated gas tank. I feel like his fight against Yoel was a great one. It was still 3 rounds, but I mean that was a fun one. Even against Marvin Vettori, I think he struggled at first, and then I feel like he found his rhythm after a while, and I think it was just a little too late. So I think that with this fight, and him knowing going in that Sean is this volume kind of like snowball type of fighter, that will help him. And I think there's an element to the fight with Izzy of just total shock. I mean, everybody was picking against Sean. Everybody felt like it was literally a tailor-made matchup for Izzy to look good. And I think Izzy bought into that too much too. Yeah, and fair enough. You
kind of
Schadenfreude for sure. So yeah, I'm excited for this fight. I think it'll be a fun one. I think that either way it goes, it'll be a fun stand-up fight. I would be very, very, very surprised if there was much wrestling, unless it was just kind of to induce clinch strikes.
I think if it's grappling, it's going to be like when Costa fought Rockhold.
Okay.
On the ground due to the heavy strikes.
Due to heavy strikes, yeah, for sure.
And that's one thing about Costa is that I said he's so tough. He just stands there. He doesn't stop standing there. And it's even funny when and again I see both sides of this, but when Costa was fighting Adesanya, he's just kind of standing in front of him. And Adesanya's his footwork, and it's like Romero, and then there's that thing, and it's like he wasn't really being like Romero. It's kind of like it's like Adesanya approaches most fights like Carlos Condit's going to fight Nick Diaz, and then when people don't chase him, he's like, "What? You're not chasing me?" So I don't know. It's like I think Sean succeed against Adesanya because his jabs literally and his ability to not get leg kicked. That's what one thing I need to remember is it's unreal. He looks like a video game character.
Mm-hmm.
Like just avoids him somehow.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's going to be something that Paulo Costa might run into issues with. But yeah, it's that when Strickland beat Adesanya, he's pressuring with the jab and the teeth. Adesanya likes to move back and strike, but he was just getting up against the cage and then beating him there.
Mm-hmm.
When Adesanya fought Paulo Costa, Paulo Costa did not have good footwork, hit him with a lot of leg kicks, and didn't let him advance with his footwork. So Sean and Costa have just two radically different styles. One is more, I guess, like Sean's more like a Diaz brother, and Costa's more like Robbie Lawler or something.
Right, definitely.
They stand in the pocket and swing, and they are fucking tough. So, like, I hope you're up to the challenge.
Right. Yeah, so I think we're in agreement. I would say, to be honest, man, does Sean get finished very often? I'm trying to even remember. Other than Alex Pereira, I don't remember him getting finished. So, but I would be surprised that after 5 rounds there wasn't a finish.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like Paulo's gotten better. Again, he didn't finish Robert, but I think he was close. So I think that a TKO on Paulo's end in the third or fourth would be possible.
And has Robert Whittaker ever looked bad except against Adesanya? No,
not really.
I mean, not only. I mean,
I guess Dricus, but that was again more at the end. It was like the strike and then the finishing sequence. But before that, I thought he looked good.
But yeah, so you have. I mean, think about his fight against Whittaker's fight against Cannonier, Vittori, Gastelum, Daring. Like everybody that's not Adesanya, he doesn't just. It's not just some close scrap. He dominates them, and the fact that Paulo Costa could have arguably won while playing Rob's game. That's very impressive to me.
Oh yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's move on to the rest of the card. We won't stick around too much longer trying to dissect every little fight. I just want to highlight a couple of them, especially the Kevin Holland versus Michelle Oleksiejczyk. I think that's how you say it, Michelle Oleksiejczyk fight. Big Kevin Holland fan, one of my favorite welterweights / middleweights, I guess. What do you think about this fight?
Oh, I'm excited. I guess it's kind of funny because I'm not like a Fairweather fan, but I'm not as much of a fan as Kevin Holland as I used to be. Maybe it's simply due to the fact that he's not been winning as often. I don't know, but I also don't know if he's still with Travis Luger. That was never clear to me.
Yeah, I don't remember.
He's never in his corner. He doesn't mention him anymore. But he was so close to Travis Luger that when Holland went on the Joe Rogan podcast, he brought.
All right, I remember that. Yeah.
I'm interested to see. Basically, Kevin Holland reminds me of Donald Cerrone. They're never going to get a belt. They don't have the discipline as an MMA fighter to get the belt. I'm not saying they're not disciplined or talent, but again, you think about Habib versus other fighters. All he thinks about is belt. Kevin Holland, Donald Cerrone, all they think about is fighting. They're fighters. They want to get in there as soon as they can, and get back in there as soon as they can. So the thing about Holland is he'll seemingly fight anyone, but if they don't fight like he wants them to fight, he gets clowned. I mean, his fight against MVP, it was hilarious because MVP was doing to Kevin Holland what Kevin Holland does to other people, and Kevin Holland's getting angry.
Mm-hmm.
MVP was talking shit to him. Kevin Holland was like, "Let's fight." So, I enjoy Kevin Holland. I guess I don't think he's really ever going to break the top 5 in any division, but I do find him enjoyable to watch. I honestly don't know how he's going to perform. It's 185, which I'm kind of excited about that. I actually feel like he is better at 185.
Well, and I think that too, he is somebody who, yeah, he's a fighter's fighter, as opposed to what you're saying, or like you were saying about with Khabib, where he picks his fights. He just wants to fight as much as possible. He literally turned down a fight with Nick Diaz, which would have been a bigger fight clout-wise. I mean, far bigger. I mean, nobody knows Michelle Oleksiejczyk. I mean, I do. I remember many of his fights. Yeah, and he turned down a fight against Nick Diaz a month later just because he would have a fight sooner because he didn't want to wait that long. And it's like, again, it's all about the clout, I feel like, but that many fighters would be like, oh yeah, easier fight against somebody who's like a generational legend and somebody who hasn't won in over a decade. So even, again, just seemingly gimme fight with high upside, and then you take on somebody at a higher weight class at 185 who many people don't know. And it's a good fight, but I think he's got this. I guess I wouldn't be surprised simply because Kevin is kind of such a spontaneous, um, flighty fight. As you said, he if it doesn't go his way, it's very easy to kind of just go the other way. Like he is not always super disciplined in the way that he performs, but when he's on, he's on. And I think this is definitely a winnable fight for him. And I think that he could take it both standing or submission. Michelle's last fight was against Michelle Pereira, actually, another Michelle, and he lost by what was that? I think it was guillotined pretty quickly, and it was fairly recently too.
I think UFC 3-1.
299, the Vera O'Malley card.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah, rear naked choke against Pereira, and that was only in a minute, a little over a minute. He beat Chitty and Kwani before that in one of the best one-round fights you'll see. Chitty was kind of kicking his ass, and then he kind of lost in the end by ground and pound. But that was a comeback fight, and then before that had lost to Kyle Baraglio by rear naked choke, which makes sense. So I don't know. I feel like he's a beatable opponent. All of the people he has beat are not as big a names as Kevin or as well established. I mean, Sam Alvey's one of his wins, which I mean, I feel like that's almost unquantifiable. but but anyway, so yeah, I think this is a winnable fight for him. But yeah, so I don't know. I took Kevin. He's a prohibitive favorite for me as far as the lines on DraftKings were. So I paired him up in a 3-leg parlay between Basil Hafez over Mickey Gall, and then who was the other one? Jailton Almeida over Alexander Romanov, just because I think that Jailton is his strengths and Romanov's strengths are the same, but Jailton's more of an athlete. Romanov's gasses almost immediately in almost any of his fights. Even he gasses even when the fights are going his way. So I feel like those were. I just kind of paired him with those fights to make it worth the money. But yeah, I'm pretty confident that he can win this. But as you say, he's just he's almost like a wild card in a way. It's like which Kevin is going to show up. Usually he does well if he's not fighting a wrestler, but then you have somebody like MVP who's polished enough to kind of like clown him around, like you said. But I mean, he beat Joaquin Buckley soundly, TKO'd him, and Joaquin's having a real run at welterweight. I really do think, like you had brought up, it's the discipline that he lacks. And if he could ever get that, he really could, I think, find more success. But he's more of just a fighter's fighter, fun fighter. And I think he's had like 13 fights since like Connor's last win, which is just insane.
That's the other thing too. It's like often, even I know you're not doing this per se, but I mean, I was kind of this is in the back of my head where I'm like, he lacks discipline. I'm not saying that it's some like armchair coach. Like, Kevin needs to get discipline. And it's like, what draws someone to become an MMA fighter is very unique. I mean, it's such a dangerous, unforgiving sport. You could be the greatest fighter of all time and then get your knee blown out in the gym, and that could be it.
Right.
So it's such a dice roll, even if you have the talent for it. So I agree, and also, so when I say Carol's not disciplined, I'm not saying he should get disciplined because that's what I would do if I were him. He doesn't want to be disciplined. He probably couldn't fight if he tried to be disciplined.
It's part of his X factor in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's like
it's the virtue of his faults.
I'd rather not train wrestling and fight and not get a belt than train wrestling, be bored, fight every once a year. Like he'd rather just fight than fight for the belt. And as an individual fighter stepping into the octagon against another person, there has to be plenty of motivating factors beyond a belt. So yeah, no, I'm excited. One thing I do remember, and I'm still surprised by, I'm trying to like quantify this, but before Holland moved down to 170, he fought Brunson and Vittori. Brunson and Vittori both just wrestled fight in the entire fight.
And we're getting
strikes.
pieced up in the small
But you're
amount of
getting
times.
pieced up in small time. So it's like, how is Kevin Holland like piecing up Derek Brunson and Vettori just in these little moments? And honestly, I'm not trying to do this whole thing. That's where I think this is how I see Poirier potentially winning. Like he needs those moments in between those. They're not necessarily transitions, they're not necessarily scrambles, but these in between from going to striking and grappling, whatever happens, Dustin is good with that, like merging those two. So
The counter striking, but counter striking not other strikes, but counter striking to the wrestling or to the grappling.
yeah, so whatever happens from the shot to the clinch, Dustin knows how to do something in between that to disrupt it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Islam's going to have a similar game plan that like Vettori and Brunson did towards Holland, which is just get him down as quickly as possible and then just work from
Right, right.
there. But what interesting though is, I mean, Brunson's Brunson, but I mean, still Brunson and Vettori, still Vettori. How is Kevin Holland like boxing them the fuck up, but then at 170, he's not. You know, you'd think he'd be killing everybody.
Right.
It's
Well,
just,
his fight against Kevin Holland was a lot of, or Kevin Holland, sorry. His Kevin's fight against Kevin Holland, his fight against Stephen Thompson, even though he lost that fight, that was such a fun fight to watch. And it's just always hard. I mean, Stephen Thompson, if he fights somebody that's willing to engage him striking, I mean, he beat Jorge, he beat Vicente Luque. So it's not surprising that in a fight like that, Kevin Holland lost.
Yeah,
and against
fighting Jacare and then pulling guard. It's like I'm going to grapple Jacare.
And his fight against MVP, I think he was fucking MVP up on the ground in the second round. I mean, he was mounted, he was hurting him, and MVP got up and eventually, but I mean, he was hurting him on the ground. And then in the Stephen Thompson fight, I feel like if he would have grappled more, he had a road to success. But he's just kind of one of those stubborn guys that like isn't really going to do what Marvin Vettori or Brunson did to him to other fighters. If those fighters are kind of hurting him on the feet, he's just going to engage. And I mean, he beat Santiago Ponzinibbio by head kick. Not head kick, left hook. Jeez, sorry. And then Darstro Chiesa, who's a grappler. His fight against Jack Della Maddalena was a split decision, and I thought that was a great fight. I really didn't know who I thought won. If I was paying, that was on the night. There were reasons for me not being fully focused, but I thought it was a fun fight while it lasted. I kind of remember thinking it would have been cool to see it as a 5-rounder. And JDM is just one of the best welterweights now, I feel like, in the division. I mean, what he did to Gilbert after essentially being heavily controlled for most of that fight shows kind of what he's capable of striking-wise. So I really don't think any of Kevin's losses recently are much to frown at. I mean, Stephen Thompson, going 4 rounds with him out of 5 before retirement. Michael Page in a fight where once it got to the ground, it was like night and day, but he just couldn't keep it there. And then a great stand-up fight against Jack. And then that Chimaev one, which was such bullshit. I mean, again, I'm sorry. I know that you're supposed to protect yourself at all times, but he totally, like, they went for that glove touch and Khamzat ducked in. I mean, I don't know, maybe you see it differently, but for me, I just think that was such bullshit. But again, I'm a fan of Kevin. I'm going to think that anyway. So, yeah, I just think this can be a showcase fight for him, I feel like. And I feel like he only loses to guys who are named fight, people that are co-main or main event fighters almost all the time. So pretty confident in my pick of him, and I think it'll be a TKO or choke. I mean, I really think he can kind of do whatever he wants in this fight.
I think he'll be in my
TKO. Cool. All right. Is there any other? Well, let me take a look real quick. Oh, okay. So I think this has some solid. This fight card has some solid fights all the way around. But other than those 3 fights we already talked about, nothing super sticks out. I think Randy Brown versus Easy Dos Santos is going to be a fun one. I like Randy Brown a lot. Easy Dos Santos beat BSD, Benoit Saint-Denis. I mean, BSD, that was out. They fought it. It was a short notice fight for BSD at 170, and then he moved down to 155. But he fucked BSD up. Like, that's one of those like fights where I don't know if you remember it, but the referee really was like criticized because BSD would just not give up, but he was getting pieced up. So Easy Dos Santos is one of those guys who's like quietly has some great wins, and him and Randy, I think, will put on a great welterweight fight. Nico Price versus Alex Morono is another one of those where it's like they're kind of those technical brawlers. And then the other fight on there, Roman Kopylov versus Cesar Almeida. That's a middleweight fight that'll be a stand-up war, I think. So all three of those fights, again, nothing sticks out massively, but Cesar Almeida is a former Glory kickboxing champion, so his 5-0 record, even though it's small, he has a lot of hype behind him, similar to Alex Pereira. And Roman Kopylov is somebody who's a great grappler, but has most of his fights are just really fun fights with great body shots and things. So I don't know if any of those three fights stick out to you, but those are the rest on the main card.
I think really important thing to point out and remember is that Mickey Gall has fought both CM Punk and Mike Perry.
That is good to remember. Mickey Gall, my goodness, I think he's about to get smashed because Basil Hafez, he fought short notice against JDM, who we were just talking about, Jack Della Maddalena, and it was a split decision. Many people thought Basil won. To be honest, I don't think I even saw that fight, but I just heard so many people being really impressed by him, so I think he runs through Mickey. I actually have Basil as part of two different 3-pick parlays, one with Jalton Almeida, him, and who's the other one? Oh my goodness. The other prohibitive favorite. I can't remember. But anyway, I've got him on a parlay to beat Mickey, and I think that's going to be a one-sided fight for sure.
Oh, actually, I got to go more into this. So,
oh yeah, for sure.
I thought this was the case, but I just wanted to say so. Mickey Galls, he has an UFC victory over Mike Jackson.
Esquire.
Yeah, then he beat CM Punk. He also beat Sage Northcutt. He lost to Diego Sanchez while Diego was with the pervert.
Oh my gosh. Josh, whatever his name is.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. He who must not be named.
And then Mike Perry. What a hilarious resume. Mike Jackson, CM Punk, Sage Northcutt, Diego Sanchez, Mike Perry. It's fucking hilarious.
Those are almost like misfit boxing fights. Like none of them seem high level MMA at all. I mean, I know he's kind of one of those contender series type guys. I don't think it was contender series, but whatever he was on. Another welterweight fun fight on there, Phil Rowe versus Jake Matthews. I think that's a fun fight. Jake Matthews, I feel like his boxing has gotten really fun to watch, but outside of that, I don't know that he has a lot of polish to his game even after all these years, but he's definitely improving, I think. Does he? Okay, maybe I'm just misremembering. I can't picture it. Oh yeah. Who was he fighting? Who was like gouging out his eye when he was going for that guillotine? Was that the Leech? Li Jingliang?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was some BS. I remember that. Like, he almost got that choke, and the only reason I think the Leech got out of it was just blatant eye poke. Yes, exactly. You still won a decision in that one, though.
I don't know if it was blatant because I remember he had the guillotine from full guard and he had great posture. So I think Leech really was just trying to like touch something. So like if he was being choked out from the guard, I mean he's just putting his hand on his face to get something. I mean it could have been intentional. So that's but there's a lot that could have happened where it's like this guy's getting choked out and trying to press off his face. Maybe his thumb went in there, but it was kind of weird. It was weird.
For sure. So, let's just kind of run through these because, like I said, we kind of like covered them briefly. Who do you take in, Nico Price or Alex Morono?
Oh, Alex Morono.
Same. I think he's probably going to choke him out. I think Nico's a little too crazy and not polished enough on the ground, and Alex is somebody who's smart. He's like a crafty veteran who, despite his kind of intimidating. I feel like he's a welterweight Fedor in a way, not at skill level, but just this kind of like if you were to look at him, you wouldn't even think maybe he was even a fighter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Morono takes that on his fight IQ alone, to be honest. Although Nico really has that craziness X factor that he could potentially finish him. But yeah, I'm going with Morono as well. Randy Brown and Easy Dos Santos.
Um,
Zaleski Dos Santos. I don't know if that helps.
yeah.
Sorry, I just.
Um, just based on, I've not thought about it too much, but I don't see Randy Brown winning.
Oh, okay. I took Randy Brown. He is the underdog, and that was kind of the only, not even the only reason, but that was the main reason in me taking. No, actually, wait a second. I think Randy is the overdog. 1 second. That was the one that I think. Yeah, never mind.
I just know Mickey Gall fought Randy Brown. So.
Yeah, so Randy just beat Muslim Salikov with a straight right earlier this year, which was impressive to me because Muslim, he's that. What do they call him? The king of kung fu or something? He's got his own kind of tricky stand up. So that was kind of surprising to me. But yeah, personally, I think Randy takes it. But Easy Dos Santos is a live dog in that fight for sure. What about, did you even have your eye on whatsoever the Roman Kopylov Cesar Almeida fight? Was that anything that you could even pick? Are you
again, just based on names, I'd probably pick Kopylov.
If it goes to the ground, he definitely wins. He's just one of those guys who often keeps it standing, but he might, if he were to do the smart thing, especially against someone like Cesar Almeida, who's so extensive in his experience with kickboxing, I think that, yeah, I mean, he has a win over Alex Pereira in kickboxing. I forgot about that. You know, they fought 3 times and Pereira won 2 out of 3, but they were all decisions on both sides. So he has a win in kickboxing against Alex, so that's impressive. But all that to say is I think that Kopylov has a better chance if it goes to the ground. It's just a question of if he does that. And then, again, I'm not going to have us pick all the fights because there's a couple on the bottom half of the card that I just don't even care about. But what about Jonathan Almeida versus Alexander Romanov?
Almeida for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I agree. Grant Doskin versus Joe Selesky. I think that this is a good lightweight grappling. Probably a lot of scrambles.
Yeah, I guess just gut level Dawson, just based on, again, I've not like sat down and thought about this extensively, but more just based on as my knowledge as a fan from viewing. I think he has more impressive style, and his trajectory he's on is building momentum.
Yeah, I mean, other than Bobby knocking him out, which was kind of totally momentum stopping, that was a main event fight, and they were really pushing Grant. I mean, I really think that was a setup for Grant to get his big.
And Bobby Green can strike with anybody. I mean,
of course, yeah.
he and Fiziev should have been in a draw.
Yeah,
and that's how good he is.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So that's no problem getting TKO overcame by Bobby, and that was a huge step up for him. But yeah, I think he takes this, and I think it's a fun grappling match that will be enjoyable to watch for as long as it lasts. And then Phil Rowe versus Jake Matthews.
Honestly, Jake Matthews. I think Jake Matthews has you. It's funny because you'd think he's older, even though he looks younger to me. I think he's older than he is based on his time he's been in fighting.
Yeah, he's been in the game for a while.
But then I think he looks younger than he is just because of how he looks.
Right, he's born in '94, but he's fought in the UFC. He has how many fights is this? 12 wins, 7 losses in the UFC. So he's been since 2014. So he's been in this for 10 years now, and just the UFC alone. So, yeah, he's one of those young dinosaurs, as Vitor would put it.
And yeah, I don't know. It sounds so funny, but because Phil Rowe lost to Neil Magny, I think he's going to lose to Matthews.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I think it's a close fight for sure. I was a little bit torn, but I went with Phil because he was the underdog, so I put a little bit on him just because I think it's a close, fun, technical fight. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if Jake took it. Well, that's it for the card. There's a couple other fights on there, but I don't know enough about the fighters to really guess. I feel like Alan Perez will beat Jocelyn Edwards, and I think Andre Limo will beat. I don't remember who's fighting. I forgot.
Oh, what about the women's fight?
Yeah, Jocelyn Edwards, Alan Perez. Who you taking?
Oh,
I'm taking the twerker, Alan Perez.
oh yeah, I forgot there was a women's fight. So
It's the second to front.
I meant to say that
As a joke,
because there's no women's fights. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's the one. It's the second fight on the card. Andre Lima versus Mitch Raposo is the first fight on the card. Then Jocelyn Edwards, Alan Perez, and then are you taking Mickey Gall against Vasco Alves?
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. Real quick, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the bookings for the Abu Dhabi card. It's a really good card overall. I feel like you got Umar Nurmagomedov versus Corey Sandhagen. Marlon Barrow versus Davis Figueiredo. I think those two fights are going to be just banger 135 contests.
It's been better than some pay-per-views of late.
Yeah, very likely so. Yeah, and then the two fights that were announced that were kind of almost shocking in a way, at least to me, are Vicente Luque versus Nick Diaz, and then Michael Chiesa versus Tony Ferguson. What are your thoughts on these fights? Arguably, Nick Diaz and Tony should be fighting each other based on how long they've been in the UFC and how kind of like unsuccessful they've been for so long. But yeah, just what are your thoughts on the matchups? Yeah, I'm just curious because I was just kind of very surprised by both matchups.
Yeah, I guess I'm not surprised. I mean, I agree that Tony and Nick should fight, but the fact that Nate's last fight in the UFC was Tony, I can just Nick shouldn't fight he's a better fighter than me. He shouldn't have to beat the guy that already fucked up. Just something like that. But
No, I agree. I think that fight, they may even presented it to Tony, but he probably just turned it down because he doesn't see Tony as a challenge with that losing streak, even though he also hasn't won a fight since DJ Penn or whatever.
yeah, I mean, my question is, what makes someone, I mean, outside of like those draconian penalties for using marijuana, what would make a 41-year-old who is so outspoken about hating fighting want to come back?
I think he wants to fight out his contract.
That too, in money. So I think he probably needs money and wants to be free from his contract. So the fact that Nick, you're having someone who doesn't want to fight, and not only that, doesn't want to fight outside of Stockton if he had the choice. Now he's gonna have to go to Abu Dhabi. I don't understand that. He cannot fly overseas because he can't function without weed. He doesn't have weed. He can't. His anxiety is not stabilized. So I cannot imagine someone with as much anxiety as he has, who is so dependent upon marijuana to medicate him, that you go to Abu Dhabi and things are just going to be fine.
Right.
I don't think he's going to fight that card. I think
he just ends up withdrawing.
Something's going to happen. I don't
switch it to a different fight card even potentially.
I mean, this guy doesn't want to fight anyways. You think he wants to fight in Abu Dhabi and give up weed, even though now that the weed rules are even more lax? It's like
just have him fight somewhere where it doesn't matter if he smokes the night before.
Yeah, or the day of. It's like, I mean, that he would if he could. So that's just weird to me. And I know Dana White is so petty that it's almost beautiful. So in his pettiness, it's like decades old. So I could very easily see him doing this on purpose just to fuck with Nick. Sorry.
Oh, definitely. I mean, they did it with Hamza versus Nate, or when they tried to make that happen. And thankfully, that was one of those MMA gods things where it's like they were trying so hard to fuck Nate, like keep him from fighting until the very last, like October, whatever the date was of that fight card was the last possible month that they could schedule Nate for the last fight of his contract before they just had to give him up. So, and then they gave him Hamzat at 170, and thank goodness that he ended up fighting Tony and leaving on such an iconic win. I think it was, what was it? It ended up being 208.
Something like that, yeah.
It should have been 209, and it might as well have been if the referee had stopped at that time. So very poetic. But yeah, no, I think it's an interesting matchup because I don't know, maybe I'm the only one in the world, but I feel like he looked fairly decent with his striking against Robbie at times, but just in moments. I mean, it wasn't a good fight, but I just thought there was enough there that combined with the fact that Vicente Luque is another one of my favorite welterweights. He had this brain bleed in one of his last fights. A couple of fights ago. I don't know if it was against Jeff Neal or the one fight before, but he had a brain bleed, and he just really hasn't looked the same since. I don't know if that means he's more like susceptible to TKOs, or if he literally is just there's a timidity is the wrong word. That makes it seem like it's this like he's being a pussy or something. No, just like sheer like concern for like the health of his brain, whatever. I just feel like he hasn't looked the same since. So I think there's a possibility that Nick could kind of look okay in the fight, even though I don't think he would even necessarily win under the best of circumstances. It makes it more intriguing than it would have been. I mean, if this was a couple fights ago against Vicente, I would have thought this was a total squash match. But now, just because of the way he's fought more recently, I feel like it's at least less concerning than it would have been before.
Yeah, and I think his recent fights are his performance has to do with the strength of competition. He's never been able to. I've liked him. I watched him on the ATC versus Black Zillions.
Yeah, you knew who he was before.
And he was. I thought he was cool, and he's getting. Like, I think he darsed the wrestler that like in this really pivotal match. But anytime he's certain fights of his, I'm not going to call him lucky, but Nico Price was beating him up on the feet when they fought. But Nico's eye got swollen, the doctor stopped it. So if Nico Price is out striking you, that's a problem. Fights Mike Perry, very close fight. He gets that knee in the nose. Fights Jeff Neal, gets fucked up. Can't fight Bilal Muhammad.
Yeah, that's when it felt like things had changed. It's like,
So he reminds me more of Johnny Walker. He's fighting someone not that good. He can, really do his thing. As soon as he steps up, what makes him stand out, for some reason cannot execute. Because Luque's never been, and yeah, anytime he's like gone up with Thompson, gets beat. Jeff Neal, Muhammad, who did he just lose to? Joaquin Buckley. So yeah, if he fights like Brandon Barberena or something, but not like top 5 guys.
So you think he still beats Nick, but maybe it's a competitive fight? Or if the fight goes through, if it doesn't get canceled, or if, let's say, it just moves to a different card, like if they end up fighting, do you still think he beats Nick, or do you think it's debatable?
Yeah, probably. He's still 30.
No, exactly. He's young.
And Nick's going to be like 41. Like, it's like the day before the fight, it's like his birthday or something, which is like, again, I just feel like that's fuckery.
Dana is something else. I used to be one of those people who felt he was such a. I mean, he was. He got the sport to where it was in the U.S. in a lot of ways for so many years, but now he's just, I feel like, holding it back and keeps fighters under his thumb in a way that is very purposeful and vindictive. Trying to put his name on everything. Dana White's Contender Series, this, that, and the other, whatever. But anyway.
So yeah, I think you would probably like TKO Nick, just because. Well, the thing about Luque and Nick is they have similar strengths. Like, they're not good wrestlers. They have really good jiu-jitsu and submissions in transitions. Like, I mean, Luque, you're getting pieced up by Woodley, Darst him, Darst Chiesa. So I think they're almost similar strength-wise, but I think Luque is going to be way more ferocious and younger. And he's still in it for his family, I don't think he's, no pun intended, like tapped out. Yeah, I think he still wants to fight. And Nick is doing this more because he has to.
He has to get out of the country. Because I really do. I think he wants to do some celebrity boxing matches or what have you. I think he still wants to make money on his name, but he can make so much more money on his name outside of the UFC. I wonder what his contract status is. Hopefully this is his last fight. That would be great. If not, hopefully they give him another one soon enough that he can do it. But otherwise, it's going to drag it out. piece of shit they are. But anyway, Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chiesa. Do you think he just dominates him and submits him pretty quickly?
Chiesa does that. Yes, I think it will look very similar, unfortunately, to
Bobby Green can submit him.
the Chandler fight,
There's no way that Chiesa doesn't get
or not the Chandler fight. Sorry. No, when I don't know why I said Chandler. So yeah, I completely lost it.
Neil or Charles fights.
I was talking about. Oh no, sorry. I think it will look like when I don't know why I call him Chandler. When Chiesa fought Condit,
Oh man, that was so disappointing.
where you're going to see these former killers just look like a shell of themselves, and Ferguson's guard sucks. I'm happy to say that and prove it over his last fights. His guard sucks, and maybe it was good. I mean, something happened in that Justin Gaethje fight. And as a human being, I can't imagine taking that much damage and then just being okay.
Oh, definitely.
But
I think there's the Tony before the Justin fight and the Tony after. They're not the same person almost at all.
And I think it also, going to get off subject, but it exposes 10th Planet as kind of illegitimate, because you have Bravo's systems now over 15 years old. No ADCC champions, no UFC champions who represent 10th Planet. When in Tony's last fights, when he's been on the bottom, he throws his legs up and just like you wouldn't even know he did jiu-jitsu. It's I'm sounding critical. I'm more upset because I loved Tony. I still do, but it's very hard to see his decline. But I don't know what he's going to offer Chiesa.
I think it's only merciful in the sense that Chiesa has never really been a killer when it comes to strikes, maybe on the ground a little bit, but it's definitely not on the feet. So I feel like if there's a fight to give him that's high profile enough, I mean, Chiesa's a fairly popular fighter, but somebody who's kind of transitioned mostly into the punditry game as well. So
I think he kind of wants to get out soon too. I mean,
I think Chiesa's on his way out too. So that's why I think that it doesn't bother me as much.
But yeah, I see Tony throwing like some spinning elbow, getting clinched, taken down, dominated. Then he'll do his little thing where he gets guard and does the buggy choke, but not to choke, just to stall. And then he gets 69'd. That's all he did to Oliveira. Is that Oliveira would get in his guard, he would wrap his leg over, grab it, and sit there. It's just like, I mean, again, that sounds so mean, but people with good guards are active. And then when he tries to be active, he cannot control anyone's head. It's like he's trained. It's like through all his training, he never learned that when you're in the guard, you need to control someone's head. And even his fight against Kevin Lee, I mean, he gets him in a triangle, but it's like he like kicked up his leg. I mean, it's not a traditional, choke. It's still good, but like he just does not have a good jiu-jitsu game from the back, or at least not anymore.
Yeah, that's what I would say. More accurately, not anymore. Well, I'll leave it at that. I just wanted to get your thoughts on those two bookings because like I said, they just kind of came out of nowhere for me. Yeah, I'm excited for the fights tonight. We should probably get going because it's a little after 5. I'm sure the first prelims going to start. I'm not going to watch the first couple fights, at least until after the fact, if they're good enough. But here eventually we'll be hopping on to watch these. Thanks for watching our first MMA podcast, the MMAvens podcast. We'll be putting stuff out much more regularly going forward, and we'll do a post-fight show sometime next week, just going over the results and then looking at MMA news. There'll be a lot more looking at all sorts of different things in the MMA sphere. Today was just more focused on the fights because it's kind of last minute before the fights start, and so it'll be a little bit more varied going forward. And we'll like to have some humorous parts too to add to it. But yeah, thanks for watching, and expect more from us going forward. Thank you, everybody. Oh, I guess, sorry, do you have anything to say before we
Oh, no.
All right, well, here, so speaking for Slater, Roland, Wraith, we are the MMAvens, and we'll hear more from us soon.